This is an ad by BetterHelp. What's your perfect night? Maybe you're settled at home alone or with loved ones, covered in blankets, about to watch your favorite show. It's cozy, it's calm, and you're ready for a perfect night in. Therapy can feel a bit like that. A place for comfort. A time when you replenish your energy and take care of yourself. And hey, you can even do it without leaving that same cozy couch. This season is the perfect time to give therapy a try, right from the comfort of home. With BetterHelp, get matched with a tailored therapist based on your needs and preferences, entirely online. Designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a therapist, and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com to learn more and save 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.
Big shout out to you for making it through the hectic holiday season. This new year, get clean, quality, pregnancy nutrient support off your to-do list, including Ritual's best-selling Essential Prenatal Multivitamin, designed with 12 traceable key ingredients to support a healthy pregnancy. With big changes coming up, take the small steps now and start today with 30% off a 3-month supply at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Rise up! Team Rise! Rise up! Team Rise!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, best of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today's NFL Wire site covering the Arizona Cardinals. In our only show that we're doing this week, as it is a holiday week, and you know, got families and stuff to do, and my co-host joins me, Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site, and this is kind of going back. It's a late show. We're recording on a Friday. We haven't talked about the Cardinals game. I didn't have Cam DeSilva on from Rams Wire, but this is one of those weeks, right, Seth? One, we probably didn't want to talk too much about the Cardinals game and their loss to the Panthers anyway, because gross. That was embarrassing.
Yeah, just not ideal. It's interesting to see. I will say this. It's interesting to see the fallout in terms of how people react, because like if you go through some of the losses or even wins this week on the NFL schedule, and you see what teams did, or I guess I should say this week and last week, right? Because it is technically a new week.
Yeah, there've already been 3 games off the schedule so far, including that terrible Thursday night game.
Right. And so you look at it, you look at things and you say, Buffalo barely beats New England. What was it? A week ago, the Cardinals throttled New England, wasn't really close. 2 playoff teams get absolutely their doors blown off on Christmas Day. I think we're willing to, I don't know how you feel, willing to look at the anomaly of the Wednesday game and be like, yeah, that was probably the reason, right? Like there's something there, maybe, I guess. But I mean, CJ Stroud does not look good, does not look like the answer. No matter what the question seems to be, but it's also year 2. And then, like you said, that ugly game last night where Seattle scores 6 points against the Chicago Bears.
And the Bears, my heavens. And I was saying this to my son-in-law as I was watching the game last night with him. I'm like, hey, it sucks to be a Cardinals fan, but man, at least you're not a Bears fan. That team, the end of that game showed that their coaching staff, they have no plan at all. They don't know what they're doing. The players don't know what they're doing. And poor Caleb Williams. 6-3. That the way they used the last 2 minutes of that game and managed to get like 4 plays, it was embarrassing. But getting back to the Cardinals game, we said last week that if the Cardinals couldn't beat the Panthers, they didn't deserve to make the postseason, and they as such it eliminated them. I didn't realize it was an elimination situation until I heard it in the broadcast. But the one thing that comes out of this game is that I don't understand how. Now, I will say this. They were banged up. They were missing key guys. James Conner gets hurt during the game. He's rolling, but you're playing without Paris Johnson. Jonah Williams gets hurt. You don't have Mac Wilson. And I guess if we can look at that, because they gave up so many 200 and some odd rushing yards, over 150 to Chuba Hubbard, it basically came down to 4 rushing plays, because the 2 scrambles by Bryce Young gave him a touchdown, and then the overtime, the 2 runs by Chuba Hubbard. Chuba goes for over 150, but 49 of those came in 2 runs in the overtime for the win. The defense let the team down, and I will say this: yes, Kyler threw that interception, and I continue to be a Kyler apologist in the sense that no, he hasn't been playing near his ceiling. But people talking about Kyler being an average quarterback at best, I'm like, hey, guys, you got to remember something. Look at quarterback play. At worst, when Kyler is playing his worst ball, he's an average quarterback. His numbers, when he's not playing well, are average quarterback play. He's not the problem. In fact, he took you back from down 20-3 and 30-20. He was the one that willed you back. It was there are a lot of problems, and Kyler's play over the last 5 games has been part of it, but he isn't the problem. Like, you can't give up 36 points. You can't give 30 points up to this Panthers team like this and expect to win the game. You can't. And that was ultimately it. They had no answer for the Panthers, for Bryce Young or Chuba Hubbard. They couldn't stop the run. And maybe it was as simple as Mac Wilson being out, and because we haven't seen the Cardinals play without Mac, and their run defense was awful without him.
Right, and I don't want to take anything away from Mac Wilson. I think he's been a very, very good signing. But if you give up 243 rushing yards in a game, a season high, by the way, for the Carolina Panthers by 60 plus yards. That is a issue that needs to be addressed. I mean, we're talking about a team that scored 36 points twice this season, over 30 points only twice this season.
It's the only second time with Bryce Young starting that's
right,
ever happened.
That's what I was going to say. The other time Andy Dalton was starting. Remember, it was Andy Dalton's first start where everybody was like, "Oh, 3 touchdowns, Andy Dalton, he's back."
He's back.
I'll have a longer Kyler discussion at the end of the season. But I kind of text you what my thoughts are, and the reality of the situation is, if you look, and I kind of mentioned it in the opening, right? If you look at quarterback play, and you kind of hit it on the head, right? Like, quarterback play outside of 3 to 4 guys, you say Mahomes,
Jackson, Allen, who are consistently great. This year, even Mahomes hasn't been great except for last 5 minutes of a game. Mahomes,
yeah, and then they seem to be turning the corner this over the last couple of weeks in terms of their offensive production. But when you look at it from that perspective, and you look at what's happening and things like that, the one thing that I always say is the biggest issue with Kyler sits in that his peaks and valleys come in a season as opposed to season to season, right? Like, yeah, you have highs and lows during a season instead of consistency, and for that I would say yes, like that needs to be addressed, figured out, however you want to say it. But like, to act as though he's the only quarterback that has up and down play is really interesting, because you have guys, obviously we mentioned you have the regular guys. And then that next 4 to 12 range, they're fairly they're fairly interchangeable, right? And you throw in a guy like Brock Purdy, and then Brock Purdy's terrible this year. You throw in a guy like Justin Herbert, and Justin Herbert looks downright average this year. You look at all of those things, and you say to yourself, okay, like what is the answer? And quite frankly, Jess and I don't know. I mean, if we knew, we would be doing something other than this, making a lot more money. But the answer isn't always just like, hey, move off the quarterback, because as we signaled in the opening, the play of the defense was basically one of their worst defensive games of the season. Based on opponent, I would say it's probably the worst defensive game of the season.
But by far.
And then the offensive game was actually fine. I mean, you had the turnover that was, not ideal.
No, again, and the turnover, and what it is that what we're seeing from Kyler, and I wonder if his arm was affected. He did hesitate on the throw. And he had Trey McBride open underneath. And we've seen Kyler do this before. He made a decision, like, I've got to make a play, and he just underthrew it. Like, if he sets his feet, if he makes just a better technical throw, that's a touchdown, because Michael Wilson was open. He just threw it off balance and poorly after he pump faked. I don't know why people didn't ask that after the game. Is why did you pump fake? Did he see Trey's like, I'm going to go, wait, Michael's open, and just underthrew it? Because we've seen a couple underthrows, like his arm, which we know is good, has failed him a couple of times, and I think it's been poor technique. That the Byron Murphy pick against Minnesota was a case where he was thrown off his back, but he didn't get set. The second Kobe Durant pick, well, the Kobe Durant pick in the second game against the Seahawks, that came when he didn't throw it. He didn't get flatten that ball enough. It wasn't a bad technique throw in terms of that, but he didn't rifle it in there to get to Harrison, and that allowed Durant to make a play on it. But we'll talk Kyler more. But obviously that game, and now their season, and for me, the season is still it's disappointing, and because what I wanted to see is them to be in the mix until the end of the year, and to have them be eliminated for the final two games is a little disappointing. They still can finish 8-9 or 9-8, 8-9, and which you predicted 9-8, I predicted 8-9, and still have it be on track. But it does become more disappointing because of the way they came out of the bye since then. But
it dampens what was, in other terms, the year we expected them to have and in building. Now they got to win one of these last two, but they're right on track of where they should have been. They just didn't finish the way we wanted, and so that's the hard part, and that's what the question becomes about all of these guys is are they, can they finish? Are they able to finish anything, or is it always going to be a team that gets out in front and then falls off? And that's where we're at with this group, and we'll have to see how it ends.
Coming up next on the Rise of Series podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's move on to the matchup they have in Week 17, playing Saturday against the Los Angeles Rams. Let's talk a little bit the Rams' the last four games and this matchup. Coming up next on Rise of Series. We're back on the Rise of Series podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk on the Web. The Cardinals take on the Rams Saturday night on NFL Network. Locally, you can also watch it on Channel 12. They're facing a Rams team that it might be as simple as this. They got healthy. They've had to terrible losses. When the Cardinals faced them in week 2 and beat them 41-10, that was the worst loss they've had this season. One, it was the fewest points they scored, and it's the most points and it was the second most points that they had allowed, and the most that they had allowed in a loss. They were terrible in that game. And they also had a really bad game against the Philadelphia Eagles in week 12. And that's the last time they lost. They've gotten healthy. Cooper Kupp is healthy. Puka Nacua is healthy. Kyron Williams is going. But you know what? Aside from that Bills game, you know what's been the difference? It's been their defense. Their defense has allowed, they allowed 14 points, 6 points, and 9 points, and then they had the game against the Bills that they won 44-42. But they are playing much, much better defensively, and their rush defense, they've allowed 63 and 75 yards rushing in the last 2 games. That makes this team a little bit tough, especially with the Cardinals down both their starting tackles. We're going to see a Kelvin Beachum, Jackson Barton, combination. Jackson Barton ended up starting. It was against the Lions. Kelvin Beachum started against the Rams and got hurt in that game. And so James Conner, questionable. Albert Breer on Thursday night said that he's expected. He's probably going to go. But it looks like it's going to be a less than 100% James Conner plus Michael Carter with DJ Dallas playing the third down role. And that makes this matchup really tough because that defense has come together finally.
Yeah, they're playing at a high level. I mean, you talked about it the last several weeks outside of that Buffalo win. You look at it, New Orleans, terrible team, but they only gave up 14 points. That they beat Buffalo. By the way, they were 5-6 going into that New Orleans game. They won 21-14. Not impressive by any means, but hold them to 14 points. Beat Buffalo, get to 7-6. And they
have played 2 bad teams. They beat the San Francisco 49ers and the New York Jets.
Yeah.
Geez.
And win 44-42, beat the 49ers 12-6, and then the Jets, 19-9. You look at that, right? You have a total of 71 points in 4 games, and you go, well, that's not good. And you're like, well, but you think 42 of that is to a great Josh Allen led Buffalo Bills. And so those other 3 games, they've allowed less than 10 points per game, 29 points in those other 3 games. Again, bad teams. It's interesting because outside of the San Francisco game, the yardage allowed hasn't been impressive, right? Like you mentioned it, the run defense is stiffening up. Outside of the New Orleans game, New Orleans ran for 143 yards, but I think a lot of that was Taysom Hill as well, if I recall right. I'm gonna look while we're talking. But against Buffalo, they only allowed 103 yards rushing, and then the last 2 weeks, 63 and 75. So again, 138 yards in 2 games. You look at it now. Again, the 49ers. I think you were starting at running back in that game. So that was a not unexpected to for them to play well. No, and that was mostly Kamara, so I take that back. That was 112 yards by Alvin Kamara rushing. Now let's not short Alvin Kamara. He's one of the best backs in the NFL, so I don't want to take anything away from Alvin Kamara, but it was all Alvin Kamara that game. So again, the numbers are better. I don't think that anybody disagrees with that.
What's frustrating is you look at this is they're young players. The sacks that they're getting, they've got a total of 32 sacks this year, but look at their sack numbers are coming from Kobe Turner doing it again after 9-sack year as a rookie. He's got 7 sacks. Byron Young, second year play, he's got 6 sacks. Braden Fisk, the second round pick, 6 sacks. Jared Verse, first round pick, 4.5 sacks, and I believe he's got 17 quarterback hits, and I think his pressure numbers are off the charts this year. I don't have the pressure numbers in front of me, but the production they're getting from their young players is frustrating as a Cardinals fan because they moved on from Aaron Donald, and while they're not getting Aaron Donald production, they're getting production across the board from their front seven, from their front four. It's sad. It's sad from a Cardinals fan perspective.
Right. Jared Verse has 48 hurries. Kobe Turner's 41. Braden Fisk, 36. Byron Young, 24. And even like a Michael Hecht or Hogt, has 16, So those guys are all producing at a good clip, playing well. That, like you said, that's the frustrating thing, is that you have a group that shouldn't be as good as they are, but they do a good job and they get them in positions to be successful. And that's what we've kind of been waiting and wanting to see from the Cardinals, and whether it's injury or inconsistencies, things of that nature, you're not seeing it. But it's a good young group, like you said. Verse is a rookie. Kobe Turner's a second-year guy. Braden Fisk is a rookie, and then Byron Young,
also in his second year.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about some of these guys is Verse and Fisk are old, right? Like they're basically the same age as Young and Turner, and so like that'll be something to watch moving forward, because this is such a unique time with all the reclasses and the COVIDs and then things of that nature, is that you've got these guys that typically, you wouldn't want to take a risk on guys like Jared Verse or Braden Fisk, because they are 25 years old as rookies. And so they're at their ceiling, but if their ceiling is, 7 to 10 sacks, then that's a great ceiling. So
yeah,
it's that how you're trying to figure that out and work that into things. And like you said, the bigger thing is that they're doing it late in the season. Again, bad teams, but the Cardinals couldn't stop the Panthers.
Kyren Williams is heating up. He's got over 1,200 yards and over 103 of his last 4 games. Which obviously that becomes one of the keys. I mean, you look at what the Cardinals did with their rush defense, struggling to contain Chuba Hubbard. Kyren Williams is tough, and they've been eaten alive by Kyren Williams in the past. Now in week 2, they only gave up 25 yards, but that was easy to do. He only ran the ball 12 times because they boat raced the Rams in that one. So they've got to stop Kyren or at least slow him. Can't give up the big plays. The big talk this week has been about takeaways, and you've got Matthew Stafford, who has been very, very careful with the football. Only 8 interceptions this year in 15 games. If you look at 1.6% interception percentage, if you look at his career, that is the lowest interception percentage he has had over a full season his entire career. He's doing it better than he's ever done. And so somehow they've got to, because nobody's like right now with Puka and Kupp healthy, no one's stopping them. It's just a matter, can the Cardinals slow them enough to hold them to field goals or force some punts? Because I don't know if you can count on them taking the ball away against a team that doesn't give the ball up very often.
Right, and that's the biggest thing this year.
They've only got 1 turnover in the last 4 games.
Right, and that's been kind of the key catalyst to this 4-game win streak. And it was interesting, right? Because you look at right before that 4-game win streak started, and we kind of buried them, right? They lose to the Dolphins 23-15. They sneak one by a bad Patriots team 28-22, and then they get just their doors blown off by the Philadelphia Eagles. And so you look at it and you go, and by the way, that Eagles game was astounding if you go back and watch it. I mean, the Eagles ran for over 300 yards on them.
That was wild.
And so you look at it and you go, okay, this team is cooked. And then they get a stretch where they play, let's be honest, their final 6 games look really easy on paper, sans the Buffalo game, and they found a way to win that shootout against the Bills at home. And that's kind of what teams do, right? Like, you get yourself in a position where you're not very, very good, but you have a stretch in the schedule where you can kind of make up some things. And
wasn't that what the Cardinals were supposed to do? And they did not.
Right. And so that's the thing with this, like you said, the numbers overall, like if you look at what Stafford's done this year, just in comparison to his career, right? Like, his completion percentage is right in the middle, higher middle, but right in the middle. He's going to finish with around 4,000 yards again. Touchdowns is going to be near the bottom of his career. But like you said, it's the interceptions, right? In a full season, again, and let's just say one more game, because most of his career he played 16 games. This will be the lowest amount of interceptions he's thrown, unless he throws 2 against the Cardinals. And this season kind of mirrors some of those 9-7 seasons with Detroit, right? And so that's where you look at this and you see where he's at. I mean, the last 2 seasons for Stafford have been eerily similar. Now, obviously, he'll finish above that 9-6 mark. Or worse, I guess technically he can, but you look at it, like last year, only in 15 games, he threw for 3,900 yards, 24 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. 15 games this year, he's way behind on the yardage, and you mentioned that, right? Like, without Kupp and Nakua on the field consistently, that's not a surprise. He's at 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, but 8 interceptions. So you take the drop in production for protecting the ball more. And so those are the interesting things to look at, because he's basically playing at the same level he did this year or last year, excuse me. But at the end of the day, it's about how you finish, and that's been the big thing. These last games, he did throw a pick against the Jets, but before that, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, no touchdowns, but no interceptions in that win over the 49ers, and then 1-1 last week. And that's part of the reason it was so close, right? And that's what's interesting to me. If you look at his last 5 games, 58% completion percentage, 183 yards, 2 touchdowns. 59% completion percentage, 160 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. 73% completion percentage, but he had 110 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Like, you and I have talked about this, and I don't always mean to bring this back, but the Cardinals are 0-3 in those games. There's no doubt in my mind that if Kyler only plays at that level, they're 0-3, because we've seen it, right? Like, we've seen that this team, fair or not, wins and loses with how Kyler plays. And it's odd, because I don't think any quarterback is more, outside of the 3 that we discussed, but no quarterback is more the reason for their wins of the team, but also more reason for the losses of their team, right? And so that's kind of the interesting thing with that, because if you look at those numbers, I mean, do the Cardinals beat the 49ers if Kyler completes under 60% of his passes, throws for less than 100, and in the game, because he was sacked as well, gets under 150 yards passing and throws no touchdowns or interceptions? Like, they're not going to beat the 49ers.
No.
So like, that's the interesting thing about it, because it's become more of a team game outside of that phenomenal game he had against Buffalo. It's been more of a team effort from everybody, right? Like, everybody's kind of stepped up. You mentioned it. Kyren Williams is playing at an absurd pace, and the team is just able to make plays in big opportunities and big chances. Kyren Williams last 4 games has well over 400 yards rushing, has 4 touchdowns. The interesting thing is in a couple of those games he's averaging 3 yards a carry. So it's not that they're you bring this up all the time, Jess, and I think it's always astute, but people kind of dismiss some of the things that we tend to say because we're like, oh, you're just you're a homer, or you're what do you call an optimist, right? Like things like that. But again, going back to that San Francisco game, I mentioned Stafford's numbers. If the Cardinals averaged under 4 yards a carry in that game on top of it, they don't win that game. Like, that's just, I mean, Kyron Williams had 30 carries for 108 yards. Like, he had 29. He had 31 touches for 112 yards. Every touch was less than 4 yards. That was the average.
Stafford only had 160 yards passing. There were no touchdowns in the game. The Cardinals can't win games like that unless the run game is having just a phenomenal game. They don't need Kyler. But they need Kyler to be great. They need Kyler to be great, or they don't win games. And that's the part that is frustrating about the criticism, is that no, Kyler isn't playing great consistently, but also he doesn't get much help. He doesn't consistently get guys stepping up. The defense has been better, but you look at the defense last week, and the defense completely failed the team. So I don't know. Let's I don't know. They gotta run the ball. They need production. They need Marv. They need both McBride and Marv. And we talked about this earlier this season. They need production from all 3 guys. They need production from Connor. They either need monster games from 2, which has normally been Connor McBride, or they need good games from all 3. The Cardinals can't win offensively with any other way. So Connor McBride and Harrison probably need, as what would he say is probably the threshold, 250 to 300 yards combined between those 3, and then that is kind of the key for success with them.
Right, and that's what they need, and they'll have to, it's one of those things that they're going to have to rely on it, or it's going to be ugly, and that's just a reality of the situation. McBride has been phenomenal this year, but he was interestingly quiet in the last game early. Like it seemed like they took, and I get it, they were trying to methodically move their way back into the game without kind of pressing the panic button and putting themselves in a position where it was obvious what was going to be happening. And they were doing a great job until James got hurt. Right. But like 3 receptions for 20 yards is just against a terrible team covering tight ends. Is just not an acceptable day for a guy like Trey McBride. So you have that. I just think it's one of those situations where you look at the overall team, and then they have to be able to move the ball. I think you'd like to see Marvin get over 800 yards, on the season in this game. So a 70+ yard game from him. I think you'd like to see Trey get over 1,000 yards on the season. That would be a 40+, 42+ yard game from him. Obviously, everybody wants to see Trey get in the end zone, but I'm less concerned about that than I am the fact that, I like the fact that he's averaging over 10 yards per catch.
Yeah.
I like the fact that you're seeing a lot of production from him. And I like the fact that, you look at everybody else, and this is a conversation we'll have at the end of the season, but everybody else is catching, their success rate is over 50%. That's what you want in your targets. That's what you want in those guys. It's the fact that you're not getting it from Marvin Harrison consistently. He's at 47%, which is where the issue stands and what you need. So we'll see how that goes in this game. But they need their big three outside of Kyler to play at a high level if this game's gonna go their way.
Coming up next on the Res of Sierra podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk. I'm going to wrap things up and give our picks and predictions and a few props for this game as well. That's coming up next on Res of Sierra. We're back on the Res of Sierra podcast, Best of Cardinals Talk on the web. Not a lot of confidence in the Cardinals. 93% of the money line is on the Rams. 68% of the spread is on the Rams, who are 6.5 point favorites on BetMGM right now. How do you see this game playing out? I think the Cardinals bounce back. I think they do. I think they're going to play well, but I don't think they're going to win.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. The over and the Cardinals to cover feels like the right play here. I think the Cardinals play well. I just think that their defense is so back to being so bad again that you're just looking at it. I mean, the anytime touchdown numbers are absurd, right? And we'll get to that.
Kyren Williams minus 250.
Basically that it's minus 290 on FanDuel.
Oh my gosh!
It's basically don't take that.
Right.
Obviously, without the Connor props, we'll see how that works out. But
Connor's listed as a minus 105 for anytime touchdown on BetMGM.
Okay, he's not listed yet on FanDuel. So I'm going to take the Rams 31, Cardinals 27. I think it's a high scoring, entertaining game. I just don't think the Cardinals can stop Kyren Williams.
And I'm going to say it's going to be 27-24 Rams. It'll come down to the end. I'm hoping it's not what I hope is that it's not a failed last drive, because then all the Kyler haters will come out again. So yeah, 27-24. We'll see how that goes. Connor, they don't have the alternate rushing yards, but they do have him listed at 57.5 for rushing yards as the projected total. 86.5 rushing plus receiving. Kyren Williams is at a ridiculous 93.5. And then 108.5 combined rushing and receiving. That seems like an easy play, doesn't it? Because
yeah, it does, and it seems like he's going to have to be aggressive in this one.
It's only minus 105 to hit 100 plus rushing yards for the alternate line. So
yeah, so I just it may not even be worth the juice, right?
Anytime touchdowns, Puka Nacua plus 100, Cooper Kupp plus 120. DJ Dallas is plus 145. That's wild to me. Trey McBride plus 160. The fact that DJ Dallas has shorter odds than Trey McBride is kind of ridiculous, isn't it? But actually, my one that I like that gives me a little bit of money there, Michael Wilson plus 300. I think that's my favorite in terms of mix of value and likeliness. Plus 300 Michael Wilson anytime touchdown scorer.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good one. The first one that I kind of look at, and again, no James Conner yet on FanDuel. So the first one that I like, I think that you're going to see a little bit more from the passing game.
They'll have to. They'll have to do that. They've got Kyler at over 1.5 touchdown passes at plus 120. I like that.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. And you mentioned Michael Wilson. He's plus 390 on FanDuel. So
that's even better.
Did you have McBride at?
Plus 160.
Okay, so that's better on BetMGM, plus 145 on FanDuel. So not, get a little more juice on that play. I think that makes more sense. And you look at the passing props, like you said, the over 228 and a half for Kyler. But the one I like is his completions over 21 and a half. He's been consistently over that this year. I like that. I think the alt receptions for McBride, I wouldn't go as high as normal. His over under though is at 6.5. I think they're, like I said, I think they're going to have to lean on him. The one thing I'm looking at this week, I think Marvin's in for a big game, and I think they're gonna go after him. Plus 70 plus is plus 200 on FanDuel. What is your 70 or is it 75 plus on yours?
75 plus is plus 200.
Okay. Yeah. So 70 plus, same odds, and 5 less yards. So I would go there. I think it's going to be a lot of Marvin and McBride tomorrow. And that's, they're going to try to set the tone for next season.
That's good. All right. With that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise of Secret podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. We should be going back to someone. Well, wait, that'll be New Year's Eve. Maybe we can do something. I don't know. We'll figure something out for next week. But that's Seth Cox. This is Jess Root. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be red, see red, and of course, rise up, see red.